I felt like there was something strange going on in my house, so I faked a trip to visit my sister. While I was watching the situation from across the street, my elderly neighbour, Arthur Finch, suddenly approached and tapped my shoulder, saying, "Wait until midnight. You'll discover everything." When the clock struck midnight, my breath stopped at what I saw. But let me explain how I got to that point. As a 64-year-old woman, Genevieve Moreau, I ended up hiding in my neighbour's house, spying on my own home as if I were a criminal. Because what I discovered that night not only destroyed my trust in my family, but it showed me just how far the people you love can go when greed takes control of their hearts. My name is Genevieve Moreau, though most people call me Jenna. This house, where I've lived for the last 40 years, is my sanctuary, my history, my entire life, built with effort alongside my late husband, Philippe. Every corner here holds our memories. The kitchen where we prepared Sunday morning breakfasts, filling the air with the comforting aroma of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee. The living room where we watched our son, Julian, grow up, his laughter echoing against the walls, now filled with a strange, unsettling silence. The garden we cultivated with our own hands, each rosebush a testament to a shared dream. When Philippe died 7 years ago, the silence in the house became almost unbearable. Julian insisted on moving here with his wife, Serafina, Sarah, as she preferred to be called. "So you won't be alone, Mum," he told me, his voice thick with what I then believed was genuine filial love. How naive I was. The first few months were quiet, almost happy. We ate dinner together, sharing stories of our days, our laughter a warm balm to my grief. Sarah was attentive, even affectionate. She helped me with grocery shopping, remembering my preference for organic produce and French cheeses. She cooked my favourite meals, like a hearty pot roast with root vegetables or creamy mashed potatoes, just the way Philippe used to make them. Julian, ever practical, fixed things around the house that had broken down, his strong hands mending what my own aging ones couldn't. I thought, what a blessing to have my family close in my old age, a new chapter of companionship and shared moments. But about 4 months ago, something changed. It was subtle at first, like a shifting breeze, barely perceptible. Then, it became as if someone had flipped an invisible switch, plunging our cozy domesticity into a dim, uneasy light. The smiles became mechanical, a practiced arrangement of lips that didn't quite reach their eyes. The conversations, once free-flowing and genuine, grew forced, punctuated by awkward pauses. And then, the whispers began. At first, I dismissed them. I told myself it was my imagination, that my age was playing tricks on me, rendering my hearing less reliable or making me overly sensitive. But the whispers were real. Every time I entered a room, their hushed tones would abruptly cease. Julian would quickly put away his phone, his movements swift, almost guilty, as if he were hiding a clandestine message. Sarah would change the subject with a tense, brittle smile. "What were you talking about?" I would ask them, trying to keep my voice light, casual. "Nothing important," Sarah replied with that sweet voice that was starting to sound hollow, almost artificial to me. "Work stuff, Mum," Julian would add, without looking me in the eye, his gaze fixed on some distant, unseen point. Then I noticed other details, small cracks in the facade that widened into gaping chasms of suspicion. The door to my old master bedroom, the one I had converted into a storage room after Philippe's death, was always locked now. Before, it had always remained open, its emptiness a poignant reminder of past happiness, now simply a dusty receptacle for old keepsakes. "Why do you lock that room?" I asked one day, a faint tremor of unease stirring within me. Sarah responded too quickly, her explanation tripping over itself. "It's just that there's a moisture problem, Jenna. We don't want your things to get damaged. But I didn't remember giving permission for them to touch that room, much less lock it. I certainly didn't remember any discussion about moisture, and when I walked down the hall at night, making my way to the bathroom, I heard strange noises coming from there. Muffled footsteps, hushed voices that weren't Julian's or Sarah's, and sometimes a burst of laughter that certainly didn't belong to my son or daughter-in-law. One night, close to 11 p.m., I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. It was soft, almost stealthy, as if whoever was opening it didn't want to be heard. I got out of bed and walked carefully to the hallway, making sure not to make a sound, my bare feet silent on the Persian rug. From the shadows of my bedroom doorway, I could see the entrance. I saw Sarah, her silhouette outlined against the dim porch light, receiving a young woman. The woman was carrying a small suitcase, a compact carry-on suitable for a short trip. They spoke in low voices, too quiet for me to decipher their words, but the tone seemed conspiratorial. The young woman handed something over, cash, maybe, a stack of bills that Sarah quickly tucked into her pants pocket with a practiced motion. Then Sarah guided her down the hall, precisely toward that room that supposedly had a moisture issue. I heard the sound of a key turning, the soft click of the lock, then the door opening. A sliver of yellow light spilled out into the dark hallway, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, before the door closed again with a final, definite click. The next morning, during breakfast, I didn't mention anything. I only observed, my gaze sharpening, weighing every word, every gesture. Sarah prepared coffee with that perfect, unblemished smile that no longer fooled me. Julian was reading the news on his phone, distracted, his usual morning ritual now seeming like a deliberate barrier between us. "Did you sleep well?" I asked casually, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands that only I could feel. "Very well, Mum," Julian replied without looking up, his voice bland. "Like babies," Sarah added, her smile unwavering. Liars. Both of them were liars. But I needed proof. I needed to know exactly what was happening in my own home before I confronted them, before I shattered the fragile peace we now maintained. That same afternoon, while Sarah was out at the grocery store and Julian was at his job, I decided to act. I tried to open the door to the old master bedroom. I had my own set of keys, of course. It was my house, every lock, every door. But when I tried to use my master key, the key that had opened every door in this house for 40 years, I discovered they had changed the lock. They changed the lock on a room in my own house without telling me anything. My heart pounded hard, a frantic drum against my ribs. The rage began to boil in my chest, a hot, acrid taste rising in my throat. Who did they think they were? This was my property, my home. Every inch of this house belonged to me legally, every brick, every floorboard, every memory. But rage solves nothing. Rage only clouds judgment, twisting clarity into a red haze. So I took a deep breath, forcing the anger down, trying to think clearly. If they were hiding something, I needed to discover it without them suspecting that I knew. I needed a plan. And then it occurred to me. I would fake a trip. I would tell them I was visiting my sister Clara in another city, like perhaps Boston. I would leave them alone, giving them the illusion of freedom, and I would watch from afar what they did when they thought I wasn't around. That's when I talked to Arthur Finch, my lifelong neighbour. He lives right across the street from my house, a charming Victorian with a porch swing and a meticulously kept garden. From his upstairs window, he has a direct, unobstructed view of my front entrance, my driveway, even part of my living room through the sheer curtains. I told him my suspicions, the growing unease, the changed lock, the late-night visitor. What he told me in return chilled my blood, solidifying my vague fears into concrete dread. "Jenna," I've noticed strange things, too, Arthur told me in a low voice, his usually jovial face serious, as he poured me some iced tea in his sunlit kitchen. Arthur is 72 years old, a widower like me, with kind, crinkled eyes that have seen much of life. We've been neighbours since Philippe and I built this house, sharing countless coffees, garden tips, and a quiet companionship forged over decades. He knows every corner of my life, every joy, every sorrow. For weeks, I've wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know if I should get involved. I didn't want to worry you without being sure. His hand trembled slightly as he held the cup, rattling the ice cubes. "What have you seen, Arthur?" I asked him, my voice barely a whisper, feeling fear settle in my stomach like a cold, heavy stone. He sighed deeply, a sound of resignation and concern, before answering. "I've seen people coming and going from your house at odd hours, always at night, always with suitcases or backpacks. Sometimes they're young women, sometimes couples, sometimes groups of friends. Never the same people twice. They arrive in taxis, in private cars, sometimes even ride shares. Sarah receives them at the door, always with a quick, almost rehearsed greeting. They talk briefly, a rapid exchange, and then they go inside. The next day, early in the morning, they leave, just as discreetly. Everything is very fast, very quiet, as if they are doing something they don't want anyone to see." His words confirmed my worst suspicions, echoing the unsettling scenes I had witnessed myself. I wasn't crazy. It wasn't my imagination or the frailties of age. Something really was happening in my house. Something that involved strangers, money, and secrets. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked him, feeling a mixture of relief that my fears were validated and anguish that the truth was so ugly. "Because I hoped I was wrong, Jenna," Arthur replied, his gaze meeting mine. "Because I wanted to believe there was a logical explanation. Maybe friends of Julian's, I thought. Maybe family of Sarah's who needed temporary lodging. But when I saw Sarah receiving cash at the door last week, a thick wad of bills she quickly pocketed, I knew this was a business. And a business done in secret is rarely an honest business." He leaned forward, lowering his voice even further, as if someone across the street, in my own house, could hear us. "Jenna, I think they are using your house for something. I don't know exactly what, but it's something they don't want you to know. That's why they wait for you to be asleep. That's why they act normal during the day." I then told him my plan. I told him I would fake the trip, that I would make them believe I would be gone for a whole week, and that I needed his help to watch my house from his window. Arthur immediately accepted, his inherent kindness shining through his concern. "You can stay here in the guest room, Jenna," he offered, his hand gently patting mine. "And from the upstairs window, you can see your entrance and part of your living room perfectly. We'll see everything they do." I felt an immense wave of relief wash over me. I wasn't alone in this. I had an ally, a witness, someone who could confirm what my eyes saw, so they couldn't later say that I was confused or senile, that my mind was playing tricks on me. That same night, I returned to my house and began the performance of a lifetime. During dinner, I casually announced, "Tomorrow, I'm traveling to visit my sister Clara in Boston for a week. I haven't seen her in months, and she's been insisting a lot." The reaction was immediate, stark, and utterly revealing. Julian looked up from his plate with eyes that brightened perceptibly. Sarah stopped chewing for a second, her fork midway to her mouth, and then a smile, too wide, too enthusiastic, bloomed on her face. "That's great, Jenna. It will do you good to get out a bit, to change the scenery, right, Julian?" My son nodded vigorously, his relief almost palpable. "Yes, Mum, you deserve a break. We'll take care of the house. Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. Those words resonated in my head with a sinister echo. The way they said it, with that barely concealed relief, that eagerness to see me leave, confirmed every burgeoning suspicion. I continued with my act, playing the doting, slightly oblivious mother. I need you to water the plants in the garden every other day, and please keep the house tidy. You know, I don't like clutter. Sarah nodded with exaggerated enthusiasm, her eyes sparkling with what I now recognized as a glint of greed. Of course, Jenna. Everything will be perfect when you return. Enjoy your trip. Perfect. They wanted me to leave. They needed me to leave. That only confirmed they were hiding something big. The next morning, I performed the whole show. I took out my old Samsonite suitcase, the one Philippe and I used when we travelled together. Its faded stickers from European cities, a testament to happier times. I filled it with clothes, toiletries, all in their sight, making sure they heard the rustle of fabrics, the click of the latches. I called my sister loudly on the phone from the living room, ensuring they would hear every word. Yes, Clara, I'm heading out there now. I'll get there before lunch. Can't wait. Of course, Clara knew about the plan. I had told her everything, her worry mirroring my own, her support a comforting anchor. Julian insisted on driving me to the bus station. That's not necessary, son. I can take a cab. But he insisted, his resolve unwavering. He wanted to make sure I was really leaving, to see me off with his own eyes. At the terminal, he walked me to the platform, his hand on my back, guiding me. He hugged me, a brief, perfunctory embrace, and said, "Have a good trip, Mum. Call us when you arrive so we know you're okay." I looked him in the eyes, those eyes I had known since he was a baby, searching for any trace of guilt, of remorse, but I only saw impatience. He wanted me to get on that bus. He wanted to see me leave. "I'll call you, son," I told him, my voice flat, and entered the terminal, but I didn't get on any bus. I waited 20 minutes, enough time for Julian to leave, for his car to be well out of sight. Then I left through another door, hailed a cab, and gave the driver Arthur's address. When I arrived at my neighbour's house, he already had everything prepared. He showed me the guest room on the second floor, a cosy space with a view of his blooming rose garden. From the window, my house was fully visible, standing stately and seemingly serene across the street. The front entrance, the small manicured front yard, even part of the living room through the sheer lace curtains. "Now all we have to do is wait," Arthur said, his voice soft, "and observe." I sat by the window with a knot in my stomach, the weight of my predicament pressing down on me. My own house, the place where I had been happy for decades, where I had loved and laughed and mourned, now felt like enemy territory, a fortress I needed to spy on from afar, to discover what the people I had loved and protected were truly doing within its walls. The first few hours were normal, deceptively so. Sarah went out to the grocery store around 10 o'clock in the morning, her car pulling out of the driveway with a familiar rumble. Julian left for work as always, his briefcase swinging by his side, the picture of a diligent professional. The house was left alone, silent, seemingly inanimate. But when evening fell, around 6 o'clock p.m., the deceptive calm shattered. I saw something that made me hold my breath, my heart seizing in my chest. A silver car, a late-model sedan I didn't recognize, parked in front of my house. A young couple got out, perhaps in their early 30s, casually dressed in jeans and sweaters. They were carrying a large suitcase and 2 backpacks, clearly prepared for a stay. Sarah opened the door before they could even ring the doorbell, as if she were expecting them, her face lit by a welcoming smile. She greeted them with practiced ease. They spoke briefly, a quick exchange of words, and then the man took out his wallet and handed a stack of cash to Sarah. She quickly counted it, her fingers deft, then invited them in, gesturing with a sweep of her arm. I felt the floor disappear beneath my feet. I had just seen my daughter-in-law receive money from strangers and let them into my house as if it were a hotel, an illicit guest house. Arthur was standing next to me, his presence a solid anchor in my swirling world, watching the same scene, his face tense, his brow furrowed in a grim line. "Did you see that?" I asked him, my voice a mere whisper, trembling, needing confirmation that my eyes weren't deceiving me, that I wasn't succumbing to some form of paranoia. "I saw it, Jenna. I saw everything," he replied grimly, his voice low and serious. "These aren't just suspicions anymore. It's real. They are using your house to rent rooms without you knowing. Renting rooms in my house. The house I built with my late husband, with years of work and sacrifice. The house where I raised my son, where every growth chart mark on the kitchen doorframe, every scuff on the wooden floor held a sacred memory. And they were turning it into a clandestine business, a hotel of strangers behind my back. The rage I felt at that moment was like liquid fire running through my veins, consuming me. I wanted to cross the street, to pound on my own door, to confront them in front of those strangers, to expose their deceit. But Arthur put his hand on my shoulder, firmly, gently. "Wait, Jenna. If you go now, we'll only know this much. But if we wait, if we watch more, we will discover the whole truth, the complete magnitude of what they are doing." He was right. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the hurricane raging inside my chest, to rein in the storm of emotions. I sat down again by the window, my hands clenched tightly in my lap, digging my nails into my palms. Over the next hour, I saw lights turning on in different rooms of my house. First the living room, then the kitchen, the soft glow illuminating the familiar spaces. And then, a light came on in that room, my old master bedroom, the one that supposedly had a moisture problem, the one they kept locked up. Now I understood why. There was no moisture. There were guests, strange people sleeping in the space where Philippe and I had shared 35 years of marriage, 35 years of quiet intimacy, of shared dreams. Unknown people using the bed where he died in my arms. Unknown people walking on the floor where I had cried over his death for months, where my tears had stained the polished wood. Tears began to roll down my cheeks without permission, hot and bitter. They weren't tears of sadness, not entirely. They were tears of fury, of betrayal, of a pain so deep that I felt like I would break in two, shatter into 1,000 pieces. "How could they?" I whispered to myself, my voice choked with anguish. "How could my own son do this to me?" Arthur didn't say anything. He just sat beside me in silence, respecting my pain, his quiet presence a comfort. Outside, the night continued to fall, deep and dark, and my house, my home, was transforming into something unrecognizable before my eyes, becoming a place alien and hostile. Around 9 o'clock that night, Julian arrived home from work. I saw him park his car, a late-model SUV he'd recently bought, enter the house with his briefcase, as if it were a normal day, as if he wasn't participating in a monumental betrayal against his own mother. 20 minutes later, another couple arrived, younger this time, perhaps 25 years old, eager and wide-eyed. Sarah received them with the same routine: cash, smiles, doors opening, and they entered carrying their suitcases as if they were arriving at any roadside motel. I counted mentally. There were already 2 couples inside my house, 4 strangers occupying my spaces, breathing my air, touching my things. "How long do you think they've been doing this?" I asked Arthur, needing his outside perspective. He thought for a moment before answering, his gaze still fixed on my house. "From what I've observed, I would say at least 3 months, maybe 4. It started little by little. At first, it was one person every week, then two. Now I see movement almost every day, 3 or 4 months. All this time, while I lived under the same roof, they were operating this secret business. Every time I went to sleep early, every time I went out to run errands, every time I visited a friend, they took advantage to receive more people, to make more money with my property. I calculated mentally. If each couple paid, say, $50 per night, and they had 2 or 3 couples every night, they were making between $100 and $150 daily. In 1 month, that added up to over $3. In 4 months, over $12. $12,000 earned illegally using my house, my electricity, my water, my gas, without paying me a single cent, without even having the decency to ask me if they could do it. They stole from me. My own son and daughter-in-law were stealing from me in the most vile and calculated way, right under my nose. The night deepened, wrapping the neighborhood in a blanket of darkness. Around 11 o'clock p.m., the lights in my house began to turn off one by one. First, the living room, then the kitchen. The bedrooms remained lit for a little longer, small beacons in the night, and then they too went dark. Everything fell silent. I remained sitting by the window, unable to move, unable to fully process the dimension of what I had discovered. Arthur brought me a soft wool blanket and a steaming mug of herbal tea. "You should rest, Jenna. Tomorrow there will be more to see." But I couldn't rest. I couldn't close my eyes, knowing that strangers were sleeping in my house, that my son and daughter-in-law were profiting from my property. I stayed there all night watching, my vigil unbroken, and my persistence was rewarded. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the door to my house opened again. The young couple who had arrived first came out with their suitcases, their faces still showing traces of sleep. A taxi was waiting for them at the curb, its yellow light a stark contrast to the pre-dawn gloom. They left quickly, discreetly, like ghosts, disappearing with the nascent light of day. Half an hour later, the second couple did the same. By 7 o'clock in the morning, all the guests were gone. Sarah went out to the front yard with a trash bag, tied securely, left it in the container, and went back inside, her movements brisk and efficient. Everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened, as if my house hadn't been violated all night long. Julian left the house at 8 o'clock a.m., ready to go to work. He wore his crisp grey suit, carried his briefcase, walked with that straight, confident posture I had taught him since he was a child. He looked like a respectable, hard-working, honest man. But I knew the truth now. I knew that behind that impeccable facade of a responsible son hid a man capable of betraying his own mother for money. A man who could look me in the eye during breakfast after having filled my house with strangers all night. During the day, I watched Sarah moving around the house. I saw her changing sheets in the guest rooms, meticulously cleaning the bathrooms, wiping down surfaces in the kitchen, preparing everything for the next wave of guests. She worked efficiently, with a practiced rhythm that spoke of long experience. This wasn't something new for her. She had an established routine. Every move was calculated, professional. She was the brains of this operation, I was sure. Julian may have agreed, maybe he collaborated, but Sarah was the one running everything. I could see it in the way she managed the business, in how she organized every detail, her ambition clearly driving the whole scheme. When evening fell on the second day, more guests arrived. This time it was 3 people, 2 men and a woman. They seemed to be friends traveling together, their backpacks suggesting a more adventurous journey. Sarah received them the same way as the previous ones, cash in hand, professional smiles, doors opening. And I kept watching from Arthur's window, mentally documenting every movement, every transaction, every betrayal that was unfolding in plain sight. Arthur had suggested taking pictures, but I didn't want digital evidence yet. First, I needed to understand the complete operation. I needed to know if there was something else, something worse that I hadn't discovered yet. And then Arthur told me something that changed everything, shifting my focus from the commercial betrayal to something far more sinister. It was the night of the second day, close to 10 o'clock p.m., when he approached me with a grave expression, his usually cheerful eyes clouded with concern. "Jenna, there's something else you need to know. Something I've been hesitant to tell you, unsure if it was my place." My heart sped up, a sudden jolt of adrenaline. "What is it, Arthur?" He sat across from me, his elderly eyes full of worry, his voice barely a whisper. 2 weeks ago, I saw Sarah meeting a man at the corner coffee shop. It wasn't Julian. It was someone older, well-dressed, with a lawyer or doctor's briefcase. They talked for almost an hour. I was at the next table, just enjoying my coffee. And even though I didn't want to listen, some words, snippets of their conversation, reached my ears. I leaned forward, every muscle in my body tense, my breathing shallow. "What words, Arthur?" He swallowed before continuing, his gaze unwavering. "I heard something about documents, about mental competency, about medical evaluations, and about nursing homes." The world stopped. Those words fell on me like blocks of ice, chilling me to the bone. Mental competency, medical evaluations, nursing homes. No, they couldn't be planning that. Not that. "Are you sure about what you heard?" I asked in a barely audible voice, a cold dread spreading through my limbs. Arthur nodded slowly, his expression grim. "Absolutely sure. And Jenna, I've noticed something else about these meetings. Wait until Friday midnight. Fridays are special. There's always more movement, more people, more activity at your house. But also something else, something more covert. Wait until Friday midnight. You'll discover everything." Arthur's words resonated in my head like funeral bells, each toll a chilling prediction. Mental competency, medical evaluations, nursing homes. It couldn't be a coincidence. Not after discovering they were using my house as a clandestine business. This was bigger, darker, more calculated than I had imagined. They weren't just stealing from me financially, they were preparing me for something worse. Something that would take away not just my house, but my freedom, my dignity, my entire life. I spent the next 3 days in a state of constant alert, my senses heightened, my mind racing. Every morning I watched the stream of guests leave my house. Every night I saw new ones arrive. The flow was constant, almost industrial, a well-oiled machine. Sarah managed everything with military precision, her movements efficient, her instructions clear. She had a small, leather-bound notebook where she meticulously wrote down schedules, names, payments. I saw it once when she left it on the kitchen counter while preparing coffee for Julian. Even from a distance, through Arthur's binoculars, I could make out columns of numbers, dates, codes. This wasn't an improvised business. It was a well-planned operation with records, a system, with months of preparation and refinement. Julian participated less visibly, but he was a full accomplice. He was the one who changed the sheets Sarah couldn't manage to wash herself, the one who bought the extra supplies they needed, soaps, toilet paper, fresh towels. He kept the lawn impeccable, trimmed and watered, to make a good impression on the guests, a facade of domestic normalcy. And every night, when he thought no one saw him, he counted the cash with Sarah at the dining room table, their heads close together in a conspiratorial huddle. I watched them through the window, illuminated by the antique hanging lamp Philippe had installed 20 years ago. Their hands passed over crisp $20, $50, $100 bills. They made piles. They put them in thick envelopes. They smiled with that greedy, predatory smile that turned my stomach, a smile I now realized I had seen before, but dismissed as contentment. On Thursday night, I decided to do something risky. I needed more information. I needed to understand exactly what Sarah had been discussing in that meeting with the man with the briefcase. So I called Camille Dubois, my lifelong lawyer friend. Camille and I met 30 years ago in a local sewing class, bonding over shared frustrations with intricate patterns and stubborn fabrics. She was always brilliant, always driven. She went back to school in her 40s, earning her law degree, and specialized in family and property law, becoming a formidable advocate. If anyone could help me understand the legal implications of what was happening, it was her. "Jenna, what you're telling me is extremely serious," Camille told me over the phone, her voice grave, full of professional concern. "If they are operating a lodging business without permits, without paying taxes, without your consent as the property owner, they are committing multiple felonies, fraud, misuse of someone else's property, tax evasion. But what worries me more, far more, is what you mentioned about mental competency and nursing homes. Jenna, does your son have any power of attorney over you? Any signed document that gives him authority over your decisions, financial or medical?" I thought carefully, my mind racing through years of paperwork, of conversations with Philippe about estate planning. "No," I finally said, relief washing over me, thin and fleeting. "I never signed anything like that. All my important legal documents, my will, my property deeds, are in my safe deposit box at the bank." Camille sighed with relief, a sound of tension released. "That's good. Very good. But listen to me carefully. If they are consulting with someone about declaring you mentally incompetent, it means they are looking for a legal way to take control of your assets, to strip you of your autonomy. The process is complex and requires real medical evaluations, psychological tests, court appearances before a judge. They can't simply declare you incompetent just because they want to. But if they have a corrupt doctor willing to falsify evaluations, if they have an unscrupulous lawyer who knows the legal loopholes, they could try it. And if they succeed, Jenna, they can commit you to a nursing home against your will and take your house legally, selling it, using its equity, doing whatever they please. Terror seized me, a cold hand squeezing my heart. "What can I do, Camille?" I asked, my voice thin, a terrified whisper. She thought for a moment, her analytical mind already formulating a strategy. "First, you need solid evidence of everything they are doing. Photos, videos, testimonies. Second, you need to protect your legal documents. Make absolutely sure they can't access anything now or in the future. Third, as soon as you have enough evidence, we file a formal complaint. I'll take care of the entire legal process. But Jenna, you must be very, very careful. If they suspect you know anything, if they even get a hint of your awareness, they could accelerate their plans. They could try something drastic." Her words chilled my blood, painting vivid, terrifying scenarios in my mind. "Something like what?" I asked, dreading the answer. Camille paused for a second before answering, her voice now softer, more cautious. "Like drugging you so you appear confused in front of a doctor. Like creating situations where you seem unstable, where your memory fails, where your judgment is impaired. Like fabricating evidence that you can't take care of yourself. I've seen cases like this, Jenna, and they are more common than people think. People target their elderly relatives for their assets, and they are ruthless." I hung up the phone with trembling hands, the receiver cold against my ear. Now I understood the magnitude of the danger. I wasn't just being stolen from. I was being prepared for a fate worse than death itself. Losing my autonomy, my home, my identity. Being declared incompetent, being locked up in a nursing home while my son and daughter-in-law kept everything I had built, and all under the guise of legality, with documents signed by doctors and lawyers, with a judge who would never know the truth behind the carefully constructed lies. Friday arrived, the day Arthur had marked as special, the day when you'll discover everything. From early on, I noticed a palpable difference in the atmosphere at my house. Sarah was more active than usual, her movements even more purposeful, almost frenetic. She cleaned the entire house with renewed vigor, changing sheets in all the rooms, polishing surfaces until they gleamed. She even bought fresh flowers, lilies and hydrangeas, and arranged them in vases all over the living room, filling the air with their sweet perfume. It was as if she were preparing for something important, a grand performance. Julian arrived home from work earlier than other days. By 6:15 in the evening, he was already home, helping Sarah with the final preparations, moving furniture, wiping down windows. At 7:00 p.m., the parade began. It wasn't one or two couples like the previous days. They were groups, a steady stream of arrivals. The first to arrive were 4 people, 2 young couples who seemed to be on vacation, their laughter bright and carefree. They wore cameras around their necks and were speaking English with a distinct British accent, clearly tourists visiting New York City. Sarah received them with an impeccable professional smile, radiating warmth and efficiency. She showed them the rooms, explained the amenities, and took the payment, her hand discreetly palming the cash. 30 minutes later, another group arrived, 3 middle-aged women with large suitcases, clearly on a girls' trip. Then an older couple, perhaps in their 60s, dignified and quiet. Then 2 single men who seemed to be on a business trip, their briefcases clutched tightly. I counted mentally. There were 11 people inside my house, 11 strangers occupying every available corner, every cherished space. The living room had become a bustling common area, a vibrant hub of activity. I watched through Arthur's binoculars, transfixed, as the guests mingled, talked, some preparing snacks in my kitchen, others checking their phones. Sarah and Julian acted like seasoned hotel hosts, smiling, offering extra towels, recommending tourist spots in New York City, playing their roles to perfection. My house had transformed into a completely functional hostel. And I, Genevieve Moreau, the legal owner, the matriarch, was hidden, watching from the neighbor's house like a refugee in my own neighborhood. "I've never seen so many," Arthur murmured next to me, his voice a low rumble. "This is different. It's like a special night, a grand event." He was right. Friday was undoubtedly their busiest day, probably because tourists arrived to spend the weekend in the city. Sarah and Julian took full advantage. I calculated quickly. If each person paid, say, $30 per night, they were earning over $300 just tonight. In a full weekend, almost $1,000. And they did this every week. The hours passed slowly, each minute stretched by the tension building inside me. I watched the guests eat dinner, talk. Some went out to walk around the neighborhood, returning later, chatting happily. At 10:00 p.m., the lights began to turn off gradually. The guests retired to their rooms, their day of sightseeing over. Sarah and Julian cleaned the kitchen and the living room with their usual efficiency. Then they too went to sleep, their bedroom light clicking off. The house fell silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. But Arthur had told me to wait until midnight. That at midnight, I would discover everything. So I waited, every nerve in my body tense, stretched taut, my heart beating so loudly I could hear it in my ears, a frantic drum in the quiet night. Arthur's antique wall clock marked the passing of time with a constant, almost hypnotic tick-tock. 11:30, 11:40, 11:50. Every minute felt like an eternity, heavy with anticipation. Arthur had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted after days of vigil with me, his gentle snores a soft counterpoint to my racing thoughts. But I was completely awake, my eyes fixed on my house, waiting for that something Arthur had seen before, that something that would reveal the whole truth. And then, when the clock struck 12 midnight, my breath stopped. The side door of my house, the one that leads to the backyard and that we almost never use, opened slowly, stealthily. A figure came out. It was Sarah, but she wasn't alone. Behind her came out a man I didn't know, a tall man about 50 years old, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by shadow. He was carrying a briefcase in his hand, a sleek leather attaché case, the same type of briefcase Arthur had described when he saw Sarah at the coffee shop. My heart started racing, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. What was happening? Why was Sarah meeting this man at midnight? Why were they leaving through the back door like thieves in the night? They walked toward the back of the yard, heading for the old wooden shed that Philippe had used as his workshop, a sanctuary of tools and sawdust. Sarah took out a key, her movements quick and precise, opened the padlock, and both entered the shed. The light, a single bare bulb, flickered on inside, casting long dancing shadows. Through the shed's small grimy window, I could see shadows moving, indistinct forms. They were talking, their voices low, muffled. They were gesturing. Sarah took something out of her purse. Papers, maybe. The man checked them with a small flashlight, its beam a concentrated circle of light. Then he took something out of his briefcase. More papers. A thick, ominous-looking folder. Sarah took them, reviewed them page by page, her head bent in concentration. She nodded her head, a slow, deliberate movement. They seemed to be reaching some kind of agreement, some clandestine understanding. The meeting lasted almost 20 minutes. Finally, the man put everything back in his briefcase, snapping it shut with a definitive click. Sarah turned off the shed light. They came out, but instead of returning to the house, they walked toward the back fence. There's a small door there, almost hidden by overgrown ivy, that leads to the back alley. Sarah opened it. The man left through there and disappeared into the darkness, swallowed by the night. Sarah closed the door, secured the padlock, and returned to the house through the side door. Everything had lasted less than half an hour, silent, secret, invisible to anyone who wasn't specifically watching, deliberately searching for hidden truths. I woke Arthur up, urgently shaking his shoulder. I saw him. I saw everything. Sarah met a man at midnight in the shed. Arthur got up immediately, still half asleep, but his eyes were alert, focusing instantly. "The man with the briefcase?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "Yes, it has to be the same one. They reviewed papers, documents. They are planning something, Arthur. Something big." My neighbor rubbed his eyes and looked at his watch. "It's late, or early, depending on how you look at it. It's 0:30. But now we know that there's someone else involved. Someone who works in the dark, in secret. This is worse than we thought." I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed sitting by the window, watching my house as if it were an enemy building, a fortress hiding terrible secrets. At dawn on Saturday, the guests began to leave. Some left early, eager to catch flights or early trains. Others stayed to enjoy the full weekend. Sarah prepared breakfast for those who remained, acting like the perfect hostess, her smile bright, her demeanor impeccable. Coffee, toast, fruit, everything served with smiles and kindness. No one would have imagined that hours earlier she had been in a clandestine night meeting with a stranger in a shed in the backyard. Julian left the house around 9 o'clock in the morning. I saw him get into his car and drive away, presumably to run errands or to his office. Sarah stayed alone with the remaining guests, bustling about. This was my opportunity. I needed to get into that shed. I needed to see if they had left anything, any clue about what they were planning. I told Arthur my plan. He tried to dissuade me, his face etched with worry. It's too risky, Jenna. If Sarah sees you, if Julian comes back. But I was determined, a fierce resolve hardening my soft edges. I have the key to the back fence. I can enter through the alley without anyone seeing me. Sarah is busy with the guests in the front of the house. She won't see me. Arthur finally agreed, but insisted on accompanying me to the alley to keep watch, his presence a silent comfort. We left his house through the back door. We walked through the silent alley, its concrete walls cool and damp. It was Saturday morning, and the neighborhood was quiet, still wrapped in the languor of the weekend. Most people were still sleeping or eating breakfast in their homes. We reached the back door of my property. I took out my key with trembling hands, my heart hammering against my ribs. The padlock gave a soft click, familiar and unsettling. I entered my own backyard, like an intruder, a criminal in my own garden. The shed was about 20 yards from the door. I walked crouched low, hiding behind the azalea bushes I myself had planted years ago, their blossoms a vibrant pink. Every step seemed too loud, every breath too strong, amplifying the silence. Finally, I reached the shed. The door had a simple padlock, one I knew well. It was the same padlock Philippe had used for years, sturdy and reliable. I searched for the right key on my ring, my fingers clumsily trying 3 different keys before finding the correct one. The padlock opened with a familiar click. I entered the shed and closed the door behind me, plunging the small space into dimness. Sunlight filtered through the small, dirty window, creating dusty rays in the air. The place smelled of old wood and moisture, the scent of forgotten projects. Rusty tools hung from the walls, silhouettes against the dim light. Old paint cans, boxes of screws, and gardening supplies were stacked in the corners. Everything looked normal, intact, as if Philippe had just left it. But then I saw something out of place on my husband's old workbench, a space that was usually meticulously organized. There was a metal box. It wasn't ours. I had never seen it before. It was grey, modern, with a digital lock on its front. I approached slowly, cautiously. The box was closed, but not locked. Just a simple latch that opened by pressing 2 side buttons. I tried it. Click. The box opened with a soft hiss, revealing its contents. And what I saw inside took my breath away, snatching the air from my lungs. There were stacks of crisp cash, American dollars in denominations of $20, $50, and $100. I counted quickly, mentally estimating. There had to be at least $10,000 there, maybe more. All the money they had earned with their illegal business for months, neatly organized, waiting to be counted. But that wasn't the worst part. Beneath the money were documents. I took them out carefully, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped them, and began to read them. The first was a rental agreement, a contract where my house, my sacred home, appeared, registered as a property available for temporary rental and tourist lodging. The owner's name read Julian Moreau, my son. But that was impossible. I was the legal owner. My name was on the deeds, on every property record. How could he sign a contract as if he were the owner? I kept reading, my eyes scanning the fine print. There was a footnote in small script. Legal owner in process of transfer, documentation pending judicial procedure. I felt the floor moving beneath my feet, the world tilting precariously. Transfer, judicial procedure. They weren't just using my house illegally. They were trying to steal it from me legally, to strip me of my ownership. The next document confirmed my worst fears, solidifying the cold dread in my stomach. It was a psychological evaluation form, an official medical form with a private clinic's letterhead. And there, in the patient section, was my full name, Genevieve Christina Moreau. The evaluation date was scheduled for 2 weeks in the future. The reason for consultation read, Evaluation of mental competency and autonomy for decision-making. Family request due to concern about progressive cognitive decline. Progressive cognitive decline. They were painting me as a senile old woman, as someone who couldn't take care of herself, as someone who needed to be protected from her own decisions. And it was all a lie. I was perfectly fine. My mind was clear, sharp. My health was good for my 64 years. But they were going to fabricate a different story with this Dr. Elias Vance, with this false evaluation, with this judicial process they were already preparing. There were more documents. One was a quote from a private nursing home. Golden Age Retreat, specialized care for older adults. The price was $3,000 monthly. There were yellow highlighter marks on the section that read, Private rooms with 24-hour security. Special program for patients with dementia and cognitive decline. They were looking for a prison for me, an expensive and legal prison, where they would lock me up while they enjoyed my house and my money, selling it, profiting from it. The last document was the most chilling, freezing the blood in my veins. It was a broad power of attorney, a legal document that would give Julian total control over all my properties, my bank accounts, my medical decisions. It was prepared, printed, meticulously drafted, ready to be signed. Only my signature was missing. And next to the document was a handwritten note in Sarah's distinctive, elegant handwriting. Dr. Vance confirms he can administer a mild sedative during the appointment. Signature will be obtained during a state of induced confusion. Witnesses already coordinated. Additional cost, $5,000. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the papers, the flimsy sheets feeling like heavy bricks. They were going to drug me. They were going to take me to a corrupt doctor, give me some medication that would confuse me, cloud my mind, and make me sign that power of attorney without understanding what I was doing. With paid witnesses who would swear under oath that I was in full control of my faculties. Everything legal on paper, everything false in reality. And once they had that power of attorney, they could do whatever they wanted with me. Sell my house, empty my accounts, lock me up in that nursing home, and I would have no way to defend myself because legally I would no longer have control over anything. I heard voices outside. I froze, every nerve ending screaming a warning. It was Sarah talking to someone, one of the guests, probably. They were close. Too close. I quickly took out my phone and began taking pictures of all the documents, my fingers fumbling with the screen. Every page, every note, every detail, the stacks of cash. My hands trembled so much that some photos came out blurry, but I managed to capture the crucial evidence. Then I put everything back in the box exactly as I had found it. I closed the box. I closed the shed, carefully securing the padlock. And I ran, crouched low, heart pounding, back to the back door, slipping out into the alley like a phantom. Arthur was waiting for me in the alley, his face an expression of pure anguish. I thought they had discovered you, Jenna. You were in there almost 20 minutes. I couldn't speak. I only showed him my phone with the photos, my fingers still shaking as I swiped through them. He looked at the screen, swiped image after image, and his face grew paler and paler, his jaw dropping. My God, Jenna, this is a complete criminal scheme. They aren't just stealing from you. They are systematically destroying you, erasing you. I nodded. Tears I could no longer hold back, rolling down my cheeks, hot and heavy. I need to call Camille. I need to do something now. I can't wait any longer. We returned to Arthur's house. With trembling hands, I dialed my lawyer friend's number. It was early Saturday, but Camille answered on the third ring, her voice crisp and alert. Camille, it's Jenna. I have everything. All the proof. I told her everything. The photos, the documents, the hidden cash, the complete, monstrous plan. Camille remained silent for a long moment after I finished, absorbing the horrific details. Then she spoke, her voice professional, controlled, but full of contained fury. Jenna, this is planned kidnapping, document fraud, conspiracy to commit several serious crimes, elder abuse. With the evidence you have, we can stop them. But you need to act fast. If that medical appointment is in 2 weeks, it means they are going to accelerate everything soon. What should I do? I asked, completely reliant on her guidance. Camille took a deep breath, her mind clearly already formulating a comprehensive strategy. First, don't return to that house yet. Stay where you are safe, at Arthur's. Second, tomorrow, Sunday, I need you to come to my office. We will bring in a trusted notary. We will make legal documents to protect your assets immediately, to cancel anything they might attempt. Third, on Monday we will file a formal complaint with all this evidence. And fourth, she paused, her voice dropping. Fourth, we are going to set a trap for them. A trap? I repeated Camille's words, not fully understanding. My mind was still reeling from everything I had discovered in the shed. The false documents, the plan to drug me, the nursing home already quoted. Everything was too much, too dark, too calculated. Yes, Jenna, a trap, Camille confirmed firmly. They think you don't know anything. They think you are still traveling, trusting and naive. That is your advantage. You have evidence that they don't know you possess. Now we are going to use it strategically to ensure they face full legal consequences. We don't just want to stop them. We want them to pay for every part of their criminal plan. On Sunday morning, Arthur drove me in his reliable old Volvo to Camille's office in downtown Los Angeles. She was waiting for me with another man, the notary she had mentioned. His name was Marcus Thorne. He was about 50 years old, with a serious but kind face, his eyes conveying a quiet reassurance. Mrs. Moreau, I am very sorry for what you are going through, he told me, shaking my hand with a firm grip. But I want you to know that we are going to protect your assets completely. When we finish today, your son will not be able to touch a single cent of your estate without facing immediate criminal charges. Over the next 3 hours, I signed documents, many documents, my hand aching from the effort. Camille explained them one by one, with patience and clarity, each one a shield against their malicious intent. This is a revocable power of attorney. It cancels any power that might exist in Julian's name, existing or future. This other one is a declaration of full mental competency, certified by a forensic psychologist who will come to evaluate you tomorrow, Jenna, to ensure an official, unimpeachable record of your faculties. This is a new will that replaces any previous version and explicitly specifies that Julian is excluded as an heir due to fraudulent actions. And this last one is a preventative protection order that we will file with the judge on Monday, a legal injunction against them attempting anything further. Each signature I put on those papers made me feel stronger, more in control, a burgeoning sense of empowerment replacing the raw terror. I was no longer the confused victim spying from the neighbor's window. Now I was a woman taking definitive legal action against those who tried to destroy me. And the trap? I asked when we finished with the documents, a spark of defiance in my voice. Camille smiled. It wasn't a cheerful smile. It was the smile of a strategist, preparing the final, decisive move in a complex game of chess. The trap requires your acting, Jenna. You need to go home. My heart leapt, a sudden tremor of fear. Go home? Now? Camille shook her head. Not today. Tomorrow night. You will return as if nothing had happened. As if you had really been traveling all week, visiting Clara. You will arrive tired, happy to be home, without the slightest suspicion of what you have discovered. And for the next few days, you will act completely normal, even sweet. Meanwhile, we will be working behind the scenes. Marcus Thorne leaned forward and added, We will also contact the municipal authorities. A housing inspector will make a surprise visit to your house. If they find an illegal lodging operation, they can shut down the business immediately and apply severe fines. But there's more, Camille continued, her voice hardening. I've been investigating Dr. Elias Vance, the doctor mentioned in those notes. He has a questionable history. He has already been investigated twice by the medical board for unethical practices related to dubious evaluations. With your complaint and the photographic evidence, we can initiate a formal investigation against him too. If they discover he was willing to drug patients to obtain fraudulent signatures, he will lose his medical license and face criminal charges, possibly even jail time. The magnitude of the plan began to take shape in my mind. It wasn't just about stopping Julian and Sarah. It was about dismantling the entire corrupt network they had built. The corrupt doctor, the false witnesses they had coordinated, the illegal lodging business, everything. How long will all this take? I asked, eager for a timeline. Camille looked at Marcus before answering. The inspector can go this week, probably Wednesday or Thursday. The investigation of the doctor will take longer. But with your formal complaint on Monday, the process will begin immediately. And as for Julian and Sarah, she made a dramatic pause, her eyes glinting. The final confrontation will be when they least expect it, when they believe everything is going perfectly according to their plan. I spent the rest of Sunday at Arthur's house, mentally rehearsing how I would act when I returned. I had to be convincing. I couldn't show anger, suspicion, or fear. I had to be the trusting mother returning happily from visiting her sister, the naive mother-in-law who knows nothing about what is happening in her own house, about the betrayal brewing beneath her very roof. It was ironic. They had been acting in front of me for months, crafting their lies with careful precision. Now it was my turn to act in front of them, to play the part of the unsuspecting victim while secretly holding all the cards. On Monday night, with a suitcase in hand and my heart beating like a war drum against my ribs, I walked toward my house. Arthur had driven me to the corner, but I walked the rest of the way, deliberately, so it would look like I arrived by taxi. I rang the doorbell, a familiar chime that now sounded strangely ominous. I heard hurried footsteps inside. The door opened. Julian was there, his face a mask of surprise, quickly replaced by feigned warmth. "Mom, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." I smiled with the warmth a mother reserves for her son, a smile that felt like acid on my lips. Although inside my heart was breaking, shattering into a million pieces, I replied, "Oh, I decided to come back a day early. I missed my house, my own bed." Sarah appeared behind Julian, her smile perfect, too perfect, a practiced, artificial thing. "Welcome back, Jenna. How was the trip?" I entered my house, feeling like I was stepping into enemy territory, every step a calculated risk. Everything looked normal, clean, tidy. No trace of the 11 guests who had occupied these spaces just 2 nights ago. Sarah had done an impeccable job erasing the evidence, leaving no stone unturned. "The trip was wonderful," I lied with surprising ease, the words flowing effortlessly. "Clara spoiled me a lot. But you know, there's no place like your own home." They took my suitcase to my room, setting it gently on the bed. They prepared tea, their movements solicitous. They sat with me in the living room, asking for details of the invented trip, eager for every fabricated anecdote. I responded with stories I had prepared, adding convincing details about restaurants Clara and I supposedly visited, about walks we took along the esplanade, about conversations we had about old friends. Julian and Sarah listened, nodded, smiled, but I could see something behind their eyes, relief, profound, immense relief. Relief that I had returned without suspicion, relief that their secret remained intact, undiscovered. "The house looks very nice," I commented, looking around, admiring the pristine surfaces. "You took care of it perfectly." "Oh, of course," Sarah responded quickly, perhaps too quickly, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. "We cleaned everything, watered the garden, everything as you asked." I took a sip of tea and added casually, "It even smells different, like new cleaner, a bit like disinfectant." I saw a micro-flash of panic in Sarah's eyes, quickly suppressed, but I caught it. "Oh yes, we did a deep cleaning," she chirped, her voice a little too bright. "We wanted everything to be perfect for your return." Liar. She had cleaned to erase the traces of dozens of strangers who had occupied my home, to scrub away the lingering scent of their presence. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in a week, but I didn't really sleep. I stayed awake, listening, every nerve attuned to the sounds of the house. Around 11 o'clock p.m., I heard muffled voices coming from Julian and Sarah's room, urgent whispers. I got up silently, my bare feet padding softly on the rug, and walked to their door. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of light escaping. I pressed my ear against the crack, holding my breath. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Julian asked in a tense, anxious voice, a stark contrast to his earlier composure. "No, she doesn't suspect anything," Sarah replied confidently, her voice low and steady, laced with a chilling assurance. "She's the same as always, gullible, trusting. The plan is still on." "And Dr. Vance?" Julian asked, his voice still tinged with worry. "Everything is already coordinated," Sarah confirmed, a note of triumph in her voice. "The appointment is next Friday. We'll give her the sedative in her breakfast, a mild dose. We'll say we're taking her for a routine checkup. By the time she realizes what she signed, it will be too late. The power of attorney will be registered, and we will have complete control." There was a brief silence, punctuated only by their soft breathing. Then Julian spoke again, his voice lower, colder, a voice I barely recognized as my son's. "And after that?" "After that," Sarah replied, her tone chillingly dispassionate. "After that, we commit her. We already have the place. Golden Age Retreat accepts patients with cognitive decline. We'll visit her once a month to keep up appearances, and in the meantime, this house will be completely ours, to do with as we please." Those words pierced me like knives, each syllable a fresh wound. I returned to my room in silence, with silent tears rolling down my face. But they weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of pure rage and steel determination. They had sealed their fate. I had just heard the complete confession, a full, unvarnished admission of their depraved plan, and even though I hadn't recorded it, I now knew every detail, including the exact date, next Friday. I had less than a week to execute the perfect countertrap. On Tuesday morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. I made coffee, prepared breakfast, and chatted with Julian and Sarah about trivialities, about the weather, about Julian's work, about Sarah's plans for the day. They were also acting, maintaining their facade of caring family members. We were all actors in this macabre play where each one knew a different script. But I had an advantage. I knew they were acting. They didn't know I was doing it too. As soon as Julian left for work and Sarah went out to the grocery store, I called Camille from my room. The door closed and locked. I told her word for word what I had heard the night before, every chilling detail. "Perfect," she said with satisfaction, her voice taut with professional resolve. "Friday is the appointment with the corrupt doctor. That gives us time. The municipal inspector will visit your house on Thursday. It's better that it is before they try to drug you." "Do you think they will receive guests this week?" I asked. I thought for a moment. "Probably Thursday and Friday night. They always have more movement on those days, especially for weekend tourists." Camille paused thoughtfully. "Then we will coordinate the inspector's visit for Thursday night, when the house is full of living evidence." Over the next 2 days, I maintained my perfect performance, a mask of sweet, trusting grandmother. I asked Sarah if she needed help with anything, offering to fold laundry or prepare a meal. I offered Julian his favorite cookies, oatmeal raisin, that I baked specially, leaving them on the counter for him to find after work. They seemed relaxed, even smug, convinced that their plan remained intact, proceeding exactly as they envisioned. On Wednesday night, Sarah even showed me a glossy brochure. "Jenna, I found this health centre that offers preventive checkups for people your age, seniors. How about I take you on Friday? It's free for seniors, a community initiative." Free, I thought, a bitter taste in my mouth. Liar. They were going to pay $5,000 for that checkup, for that false evaluation. I feigned genuine interest. A checkup? Well, that wouldn't be bad. I haven't been to the doctor in a while. Sarah smiled with relief, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Excellent. I've already made this appointment for 10 o'clock in the morning on Friday. I'll go with you." I nodded sweetly, a placid smile on my face, while inside my blood was boiling, my mind sharp and focused. She was closing the trap, completely unaware that I had already closed a bigger, more intricate trap around her. On Thursday afternoon, while Sarah and Julian were preparing the house for the night's guests, setting out fresh towels, plumping pillows, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Camille. "Inspector confirmed for 9 o'clock p.m. Police will be on standby nearby. Stay in your room when he arrives. We'll take care of everything." My heart started beating faster. A surge of adrenaline, a mixture of apprehension and grim satisfaction. Tonight, their carefully constructed world would begin to crumble. As expected, the guests began to arrive around 7 o'clock that night. First, a young couple with large backpacks, college students on a budget trip. Then, 3 women who seemed to be on a girls' trip, their laughter echoing in the foyer. Then a lone businessman with a briefcase and small suitcase, looking tired but efficient. By 8:30, there were 7 strangers again occupying my house, their presence an undeniable testament to the illegal operation. Sarah played her role as the expert hostess, guiding them, explaining. Julian helped with the bags, showed them the rooms, smiled professionally. I was in my room, supposedly reading a novel, but in reality I was waiting, watching the clock, every second dragging. Every minute felt like an hour. 8:40, 8:50, 5 minutes to 9. And then I heard the sound I had been waiting for. The doorbell, firm, authoritative, distinct from the usual hesitant rings of their guests. It wasn't the doorbell of an expected guest. It was the doorbell of someone with authority. I heard hurried footsteps, Julian's voice asking who it was from inside, a tremor of irritation in his tone. Then a strong male voice from outside. "Municipal inspector. Open the door, please." Silence. A heavy, dense silence, pregnant with unspoken dread. Then the sound of the door opening slowly. "Inspector, is there a problem?" Julian asked, trying to sound calm, but his voice cracked, betraying his nerves. "We received an anonymous complaint about an illegal lodging operation at this address," the inspector stated, his voice professional, unyielding. I need to inspect the property. There must be a mistake, I heard Sarah's voice, higher pitched than normal, strained. This is a private residence. We don't operate any business. The municipal code indicates otherwise, the inspector replied with a professional but inflexible tone. Then you won't mind if I verify. I have an inspection order signed by the municipal judge. If you don't voluntarily let me in, I will return with the police and a search warrant, and the situation will become far more complicated. There was another agonizing silence. Then Julian yielded, his voice barely audible. Of course, Inspector. Come in. I peeked just a crack out of my door, a tiny sliver of visibility. I could see part of the living room. The inspector was a man in his 40s, dressed in an official municipal shirt, clipboard in hand, his demeanor serious and composed. Behind him was another younger man, probably his assistant, with a camera. They began to walk through the house. The inspector asked questions, his voice clear and resonant. How many people reside here permanently? Julian answered with a trembling voice. 3. My mother, my wife, and me. The inspector looked around the living room. There were the 7 guests, some sitting on the sofa, others standing awkwardly, all with confused expressions, clearly taken aback. And these people are... Sarah tried to improvise, her voice desperate. They are friends. Friends visiting. The inspector walked toward one of the guests, a man in his 30s with a backpack. Sir, are you a friend of the family? The man, honest or perhaps nervous, replied, No, sir. I reserved a room online. I paid $35 a night. Julian's face went utterly pale, draining of all colour. Sarah tried to intervene, a frantic protest. He's confused, Inspector. I don't know what he's talking about. But the inspector was already walking toward the bedrooms. He opened the door to what had been my master bedroom. Inside were the 3 women, their suitcases open on the floor, clothes on the bed, toiletries in the private bathroom. And these ladies are friends too, Mrs. Moreau? Sarah's silence was answer enough, a deafening admission of guilt. The inspector took out a measuring device from his briefcase. He began to count the occupied rooms, taking photos of each one, his assistant documenting everything with the camera. Room 1 occupied by 2 non-residents, Room 2 occupied by 3 non-residents, Room 3 occupied by 1 non-resident, shared bathrooms showing multiple use, kitchen with utensils for more than 3 people, extra towels piled in the hallway. Every sentence was another nail in the coffin of their illegal business, each factual observation sealing their fate. Julian attempted one last, pathetic defense. Inspector, this is a misunderstanding. Perhaps we occasionally help acquaintances who need lodging, but it's not a business. The inspector interrupted him, his voice firm. Do you charge money for that lodging, Mr. Moreau? Julian hesitated, his mouth opening and closing. Well, sometimes we receive a voluntary contribution for expenses. The inspector shook his head, his expression unwavering. That's called a business, a lodging business. And to operate a lodging business, you need a commercial license, a tourist operating permit, a fire safety certificate, a sanitation certificate, and payment of corresponding taxes. Do you have any of those documents? The silence was absolute, suffocating. Sarah and Julian looked at each other, their faces a tableau of utter defeat. They knew they had nothing. The inspector continued, his voice calm but authoritative. According to the municipal code, operating a commercial lodging business without permits constitutes a serious violation. The fine is $10,000. Furthermore, I must inform you that the tax authorities will be notified about undeclared income, and since this property is registered in the name of... He looked at his papers, then directly at Sarah and Julian. Genevieve Christina Moreau, who according to records has not authorized any commercial activity, this could also constitute fraudulent use of someone else's property. I felt it was the moment. The perfect, devastating moment. I opened my bedroom door and stepped out. All eyes turned toward me, the guests confused and bewildered, the inspector with a professional, assessing expression, and Julian and Sarah with faces of pure terror, their composure utterly shattered. "Good evening," I said with a calm, steady voice that surprised even myself. "I am Genevieve Moreau, the owner of this property." The inspector nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Moreau, did you authorize the operation of a lodging business on your property?" I took a moment, letting the silence hang heavy, looking directly into the eyes of my son and daughter-in-law, letting them see the betrayal, the fury, the deep, abiding pain in my own. "No, Inspector," I said, my voice clear and firm. "I authorized nothing. In fact, I just discovered this situation a few days ago." Sarah took a desperate step toward me. "Mum, I can explain. Please." I raised my hand, stopping her, my gesture sharp and decisive. "I don't want explanations, Sarah. Not now." I turned to the inspector. "What happens now?" He closed his clipboard with a definitive snap. "The current guests will have to vacate the property immediately. We will give them 30 minutes to gather their belongings. Your son and daughter-in-law will receive the official fine notification and will have to appear before the municipal judge next week. I have also notified the police. There are 2 officers outside in case additional assistance is needed for the eviction." The next 30 minutes were chaotic. The guests collected their things hastily, some demanding refunds from Sarah, their voices indignant. She had kept the cash in her purse and had to return it, slowly, grudgingly, under the watchful eye of the inspector. Julian remained paralyzed, unable to speak, slumped on the sofa, watching as his illegal business crumbled in minutes. When the last guest left, muttering curses, the inspector handed me a copy of the official report. "Mrs. Moreau, I recommend you consult with a lawyer. You have the right to sue for damages." "I already have a lawyer, Inspector," I replied, a small, grim smile touching my lips. "Thank you for your work tonight." When the inspector and his assistant finally left, the house fell into a deathly silence, thick and suffocating. The 3 of us remained in the living room. I was standing by the window looking out at the empty street. Julian was still sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands, trembling. Sarah was standing near the door, arms crossed, her face contorted with the expression of a cornered animal, her perfect facade finally completely gone. It was she who spoke first, her voice no longer sweet or calculating. It was desperate, raw. "Mum, I know this looks bad, but we had our reasons. The house expenses are high. We have debts." I turned to her slowly, my gaze cold and unblinking. "Reasons? Debts?" And that was sufficient justification to turn my home into an illegal business without my consent? To desecrate my memories? Sarah took a defiant step toward me. "We were going to tell you eventually. We just wanted to save up first. To have some money before..." "Before what?" I interrupted with a cutting voice, my own voice now sharper than I thought it could be. "Before drugging me and making me sign a fraudulent power of attorney, stealing my house outright." The silence that followed was deafening, chilling. Sarah turned an ashen white, her eyes wide with shock. Julian raised his head abruptly, his eyes full of terror, of dawning comprehension. "How?" Julian started to say, his voice breaking, a raw, wounded sound. "How do I know?" I completed the question for him, my voice dangerously calm. "Because I was never traveling, Julian. I was here, across the street, watching, discovering every detail of your vile and calculated plan. I walked to the center of the living room, looking at both of them with an intensity that made them instinctively step back, recoil. I know about the illegal lodging business. I know about the cash hidden in the shed. I know about Dr. Elias Vance. I know about the Friday appointment where you planned to sedate me. I know about the power of attorney you wanted to make me sign. And I know about the Golden Age Retreat nursing home, where you planned to lock me up, to dispose of me. Sarah shook her head frantically, a pathetic, desperate gesture. No, it's not what you think. Yes, we talked to the doctor, but it was just for precaution because we were worried about your health. Stop the lies, I shouted, and my voice resonated in the walls of my own house, a powerful, angry echo. I found the documents, Sarah. I saw them with my own eyes. I read the notes written in your handwriting. Mild sedative during the appointment. Signature will be obtained during a state of induced confusion. Those were your exact words. Sarah's face lost all colour, becoming a pale mask. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. She was utterly speechless, finally defeated. I turned to my son, my gaze softening, despite myself, a flicker of the old love fighting through the pain. And you, Julian, you, whom I raised, whom I loved, to whom I gave everything your father and I could give. How could you? Julian had tears rolling down his face, silent, thick streams. Mum, the economic situation was desperate. We had $30,000 of debt. The bank was going to foreclose on our old apartment. Sarah said, if we could get money fast, and your solution was to betray me, I interrupted him, my voice tired but firm. Your solution was to steal my house, my freedom, my dignity. It wasn't stealing, Sarah exploded in a high-pitched voice, a last, desperate flare of defiance. This house is enormous. You live here alone. We were just taking advantage of the available space. And as for the power of attorney, it was to protect you. You're aging. You need someone to make decisions for you. I am 64 years old, I said with an icy voice, my gaze unwavering. Not 80, not 90, 64. My mind is perfectly clear. My health is good. I don't need anyone to make decisions for me. What you were planning was not protection. It was legal kidnapping, a blatant attempt to institutionalize me against my will. Julian stood up, staggering, his face ravaged by grief and shame. Mum, please, we can fix this. We'll give all the money back. We'll leave the house if you want. But please don't report us. If you go to the police, we could go to jail. I looked him in the eyes, those eyes that once looked at me with a child's pure, innocent love, and I felt my heart breaking into pieces, the shards cutting deep. And what did you want me to do, Julian? That I let you drug me? That I let you lock me up in a nursing home while you enjoyed my property? That I feigned dementia to make your life easier? It wasn't going to go that far, Julian murmured, his voice barely audible. Sarah was just exploring options, but I never would have. I heard your conversation last night, I interrupted him again, my voice sharp. I heard you planning exactly that. I heard you saying you would visit me once a month to keep up appearances. I heard you turn me into a formality, into an obstacle that had to be managed. Julian collapsed back onto the sofa, sobbing openly, his shoulders shaking. Sarah remained petrified, her mask of the perfect daughter-in-law finally completely destroyed, her face blank with shock and defeat. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure, to keep my voice steady. Tomorrow is Friday. You had planned to take me to Dr. Vance at 10 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, that is not going to happen. What is going to happen is this. You are going to pack your things and you are going to leave my house. You have until tomorrow at noon. Sarah reacted immediately, her voice rising in a desperate wail. Evict us? Where are we going to go? You should have thought about that before you betrayed me, I replied without emotion, my voice flat, devoid of warmth. You have family. You have friends. Figure it out. Mom, please, Julian pleaded, looking up, his face tear-streaked. We can't leave like this. We don't have money for a rental deposit. We have nothing. You have $10,000 in the box in the shed, I pointed out, my voice cutting through his despair. The money you earned illegally with my property. You can use it for your deposit, although you will probably need to save it and to pay the municipal fine and lawyer's fees. Sarah turned to me with blazing eyes. There was no longer pleading in her voice, only raw venom, pure hatred. You know what? Fine. We will leave your precious house. But don't think this ends here. We will get a lawyer. We will fight the fine, and we will sue for wrongful eviction. I smiled, without humor, a cold, hard line on my lips. Go ahead, Sarah. Get a lawyer. But I warn you that my lawyer, Camille Dubois, is very good, and she has photographic evidence of every fraudulent document, every criminal plan, every detail of your illegal operation. She has photos of the hidden cash, the false contracts, the notes about drugging me. Do you really want to go to court with that, with your own handwriting as damning evidence? Sarah's face fell apart. The last vestiges of her defiance crumbled. She finally understood that she was completely defeated, that I had played the game better, that while they were planning to destroy me, I was 2 steps ahead, armed with the truth. There is something else you need to know, I continued, pressing my advantage, my voice steady and strong. My lawyer has already filed documents revoking any power of attorney that might exist in my name. She filed a declaration of full mental competency certified by a forensic psychologist. And she filed a new will, where Julian is specifically excluded as an heir due to his fraudulent actions. Julian raised his head abruptly, his eyes wide with shock, his face aghast. You disinherited me? His voice was a mixture of shock and pain, profound and guttural. What did you expect, Julian? I replied with a tired voice, the last of my energy draining away. That I would reward you for trying to destroy me? The rest of the night was tense and silent. Julian and Sarah locked themselves in their room. I sat in the living room, exhausted, but relieved. Around midnight, I heard sounds of suitcases being dragged, of drawers opening and closing. They were packing. Reality had finally penetrated their heads. The next morning, Friday, I woke up early. I made coffee just for myself, savoring the ritual, the rich aroma. I sat by the window, watching the sunrise over the garden that Philippe and I had cultivated together, its colours muted by the early light. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Julian and Sarah came down with 4 large suitcases, their faces haggard, their eyes devoid of their usual sparkle. They didn't look at me. They loaded everything into their car in silence, their movements stiff and mechanical. Julian returned one last time. He left the house keys on the entrance table, the familiar jingle of final melancholic sound. For a moment, I thought he would say something, maybe an apology, maybe a final plea. But he only looked at me with empty eyes, eyes I no longer recognized, and left. I heard his car engine start. I heard the tires on the pavement driving away, and then silence. My house was empty. I was alone. I remained seated in the living room for a long time after they left. The house felt different, bigger, quieter, but also more mine than ever. I walked through every room slowly, deliberately, reclaiming every space that had been violated by strangers, by their deceit. I opened the windows wide to let in fresh air, to chase out the stale scent of dishonesty. I stripped the sheets from all the beds that had been used by the guests, bundling them tightly. I would take them to be washed, but I honestly considered burning them. Some memories don't deserve to be preserved. Around noon, Arthur knocked on my door. He brought a hot turkey chili he had prepared, its savoury aroma filling the kitchen. "I thought you might not be up for cooking today," he said, with that quiet kindness that only true friends possess. We sat down to eat together in my kitchen, the familiar clinking of forks against plates, a comforting sound. I told him everything that had happened the night before: the inspector's arrival, the confrontation, the expulsion of Julian and Sarah. Arthur listened in silence, nodding occasionally, his eyes full of understanding. When I finished, he placed his wrinkled hand gently on mine. "You did the right thing, Jenna. The painful thing, but the right thing." "Why does it feel so awful then?" I asked with a broken voice, tears stinging my eyes. "Because it was your son," Arthur replied with the quiet wisdom of his 72 years. "Because a mother's love doesn't simply go out just because the son betrays. It hurts precisely because you loved." He was right. That night, I cried. I cried for the son I thought I had, and who maybe never really existed. I cried for the family I thought I had built. I cried for the betrayal, for the greed that had corrupted my own blood. But I also cried out of relief because I had survived, because I had won, because I was still the owner of my life, my mind, and my home. The following Monday, Camille called me with news. "Jenna, the complaint against Dr. Elias Vance has been accepted. The medical board initiated a formal investigation, and he's already been suspended pending review. I also contacted the district attorney with all the evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. They are considering filing criminal charges against Sarah and Julian." I felt a knot in my stomach, a cold, hard lump. Criminal charges, jail. Ellen paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. "It's possible. Planned fraud, conspiracy to deprive an elder of their freedom, falsification of documents. The charges are serious. But Jenna, you have the final say. If you don't want to proceed with the criminal case, we can limit ourselves to the civil one, reclaiming your money and assets." I thought for a long time. Part of me, the part that was still raw with pain and fury, wanted them to pay completely for what they tried to do to me. But another part, that part that was still a mother, couldn't bear the thought of my son in jail, his life permanently ruined. "Camille," I said finally, "proceed with everything related to Dr. Vance. That man deserves to lose his license and face whatever legal consequences there are. But with Julian and Sarah, give me time to think." Camille understood. "You have a month before the window to file criminal charges closes. Think about it carefully, Jenna. This is your decision alone." 2 weeks later, I received a letter. It was from Julian. The envelope was crumpled, as if it had been written and rewritten several times, handled roughly. With trembling hands, I opened it. The handwriting was my son's, but the words were those of a broken man. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. I have no excuses. Greed blinded me. Sarah convinced me it was the only solution to our problems. But I was weak. I allowed it to happen. I participated. And now I live every day with the burden of knowing that I betrayed the person who loved me most in this world, the person who gave me everything." The letter continued. "We broke up, Sarah and I. I couldn't stay with someone capable of planning something so vile, so heartless. I moved alone into a small, rented apartment, a tiny place. I lost my job when the scandal became public. I'm working construction now, hard physical labor, paying off the debts little by little. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, that if I could go back in time, I would change everything, that the memory of what I did to you haunts me every night." The letter ended simply, "I loved you. I love you. And I regret having lost you. Your son, who no longer deserves to be called that, Julian." I cried as I read those words, hot tears blurring the ink. Part of me wanted to tear up the letter and forget, to erase him from my life completely. But another part, that stubborn maternal part Arthur had mentioned, felt my son's pain. It didn't justify his actions. It would never justify them. But it was real pain, real repentance. Or at least I wanted to believe it was. I put the letter in a drawer. I wasn't ready to answer. Maybe I never would be. But I couldn't throw it away either. A month later, I had to make the decision about the criminal charges. I sat down with Camille in her office, the decision heavy on my heart. "If I proceed with the charges, what would happen?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She was honest with me, as always. "Probably 2 to 5 years in jail for both of them. Sarah more time because she was the main architect of the plan, the driving force. Julian perhaps less if he cooperates and shows genuine remorse. They would have permanent criminal records, difficulty finding work in the future. Basically, their lives would be marked forever, undeniably changed." I took a deep breath. "And if I don't proceed?" Camille leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "The municipal fine is still standing. They will have to pay it. Dr. Vance will lose his license and face charges regardless of what you decide about Julian and Sarah. And civilly, they are already legally prevented from coming near you or your property. You have secured yourself completely." I closed my eyes. I thought about Philippe, what he would have wanted. I thought about the boy Julian once was, before greed corrupted him. I thought about the kind of person I wanted to be at the end of my life, the legacy of my actions. "I will not file criminal charges," I said finally, the words a quiet declaration. Camille nodded without judgment, her expression softening. "Are you sure, Jenna?" "No," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "But it is what I can live with. They will have to live with what they did. That is enough of a prison for them." Camille smiled faintly, a small, sad smile. "You are more generous than they deserve, Jenna." 6 months have passed since that night, when the inspector knocked on my door. The house is truly mine again now. I hired a professional cleaning company that eliminated all traces of the guests, of their presence, of the lies that had permeated its walls. I painted the walls new colours, soft blues in the living room, warm yellows in the kitchen, a serene lavender in my bedroom. I donated the furniture that had been used by strangers and bought new, comfortable pieces, chosen with care and joy. I converted my old master bedroom, the room that had been the centre of their scheme, into an art studio. I always wanted to paint, to express the vibrant world I saw, and now I have the time and peace to do it, to heal through creation. Arthur is still my neighbour and my best friend, my steadfast confidant. We eat dinner together twice a week, sharing stories and quiet companionship. He helped me install a state-of-the-art security system in the house, not because I am afraid, but because I now value my privacy and my peace more than ever, a tangible barrier against future intrusions. Camille became more than my lawyer. She is my confidant, my legal protector, my dear friend. I made sure to update my will, leaving something significant to her for everything she did, a testament to her loyalty and unwavering support. And Julian. I haven't heard from him directly since that letter, but through mutual acquaintances, I know he is still working in construction, that he is slowly paying his debts, that he lives alone, his life irrevocably altered. There are days when I think about answering his letter. There are days when I think about calling him, hearing his voice, seeing if the repentance is real. But then I remember the metal box in the shed, the documents about drugging me, the conversations about locking me in a nursing home, and the wound bleeds again, fresh and sharp. Maybe someday I can forgive, not forget. I will never be able to forget, but maybe forgive. My therapist says that forgiveness is not for the person who hurt you. It is for yourself, to free yourself from the weight of hatred, to release the burden of the past. I'm working on that, slowly, painfully, but working. One afternoon, while painting in my new studio, the sunlight streaming through the window, Moses came to visit me. He stood for a long moment, looking at my work in progress, a large canvas depicting a garden full of vibrant flowers of all colours, a symphony of life, except for cold, desolate tones. "It's beautiful, Jenna," he commented, his voice soft with admiration. "Thank you," I replied, dipping my brush into a swirl of scarlet. "It's my way of healing. Each brush stroke is a piece of my life that I reclaim, a piece of myself I bring back." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You know what? You survived something that would have destroyed many people. You are stronger than you think, Genevieve Moreau." That night, as I prepared for sleep in my quiet, safe house, I thought about everything that had happened. The fake trip, the nights spying from Arthur's window, the shed and its horrifying secrets, the midnight when my breath stopped at seeing the complete, ugly truth, the confrontation, the victory, the pain, the loneliness that came after. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 64-year-old woman with more wrinkles than before, with eyes that were sadder but also wiser, clearer. I saw a survivor. I saw someone who had been betrayed by the one she loved most and yet was still standing, unbowed. I realized that night that love can be the perfect disguise for a trap, a veil for the most insidious intentions, I whispered to my reflection. But I also learned that self-love, self-preservation, is the strongest shield against any betrayal. I turned off the light and lay down in my bed, in my house, under my roof. Alone, yes. Hurt, of course, but free, whole, and the undeniable owner of my destiny. And that, after everything I had lived through, was everything.